Thank you so much for coming back. I appreciate it. Today, I feel very honored. I have Courtney Shepard with me, and I'm going to give it over to her. She's going to do a little intro, talk about herself a little bit, as well as her firm and her experience level.
Thank you, Katie. I'm so happy to be here with you. I'm Courtney Shepard. I'm a divorce attorney. I'm a certified family law specialist. For those of you who don't know what a certified family law specialist is, we've actually taken another bar, which I swore I would never take again after I took the California State Bar. That is a test only on family law. And you have to have so many trials and so much experience and so many years practicing in order to become a certified family law specialist.
I didn't realize that.
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's
so
interesting.
It's a good distinction
Yeah.
when looking for a divorce attorney. If you really want somebody who specializes in family law and only does divorce, you should look when hiring an attorney to find someone who's a certified family law specialist.
That's interesting. I honestly had no idea that it was a separate credential altogether.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so I've been practicing family law 19 years, almost 20 years now. It's the only area of law I've ever practiced. So that's a little bit about me.
Perfect. Thank you. So, what common misconceptions do people have about the divorce proceedings?
So a lot of people believe that you can be divorced in 6 months. And in California, there's something called the 6-month waiting period. And that's the soonest that you could possibly be divorced.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't automatically become divorced after 6 months after you file.
Mm-hmm.
There's process that needs to take place. But that's the absolute soonest you could be divorced in California is 6 months from the date that you're served with a divorce petition.
So it's funny that you said that because that was my misconception.
Oh, interesting.
That was exactly what I thought. I was like, okay, 6 months, this will be over. And my attorney said the same thing. She's like, no, it doesn't work that way.
No, unfortunately it doesn't. I sometimes wish that it would, but
Yeah.
it doesn't.
So can you explain to me, because one of the other things that I was a little intrigued about was if there's a litigation process or a mediation process, right? Like what is the difference between the two?
So a lot of people ask that question. Actually, the difference between mediation and litigation, there is a difference, but there's not a difference because even though you don't hire a mediator, a formal mediator, most family law cases do end up settling.
Mm-hmm.
But the big difference between litigation and mediation is the mediator does not have to be an attorney. Yeah, they don't have to be an attorney to be a mediator.
Okay.
And also they don't represent either spouse. So both spouses go in to mediation. They have, most of the time it's an attorney, but that person doesn't represent either one of the spouses.
Okay.
They are there to basically try to get both parties to come to an agreement that the parties reach on their own. They help them do that. They help prepare the paperwork, and but they don't give advice.
So it's almost like a neutral third party, it sounds like.
It
right?
is like
it
a
just
neutral.
brings them together, helps communication lines, things like that.
Exactly. It's a neutral third party
Okay.
that helps them try to reach an agreement,
Okay.
and then we'll prepare all the paperwork to get a final judgment if they are able to do that. I also do a lot of consulting for people going through mediation to make sure that, because the mediator doesn't represent you.
Right.
And so I think it's important if you do mediation to hire an attorney as a consultant on the side to someone that you can talk to and say, hey, does this look okay? Does this sound okay? Because the mediator shouldn't be advocating or taking sides and telling you, well, you could do better if you went to court.
Right.
So that's the big difference. When you're in mediation, you don't go to court. And litigation, you do go to court to receive court orders instead of coming to an agreement.
Gotcha.
But most of the cases end up settling, even if you, quote, don't go to mediation.
Gotcha. Okay. What factors should individuals consider when dividing assets and debts during a divorce? That's probably one of the biggest questions, right? Because everyone's like very possessive over their belongings and want to make sure things are fair.
Right, exactly. And we see a lot of times one of the spouses really is attached to the house, the marital house. And usually the marital house is one of the biggest assets the parties have. And somebody really wants to keep the house. And so I think it's very important to consider after spousal support, child support, other assets that you're going to receive, can you afford the house? Does it make sense for you to keep the house? And a lot of the times it's an emotional decision on a lot of assets. trying to figure out how to divide them. And I think it's very important that you find an attorney or a mediator who helps take the emotion out of it and look at it as a business decision in deciding what assets to keep. And you could also hire you don't even have to hire, probably financial planners would meet with you for free to help just look at your assets and say, look, this asset's a good asset to keep for you because it will generate so much money a month, and help you with that process.
Yeah, because it is emotional. I mean, we all love our homes, and especially when you have children and you have a lot of history, you have a lot of love in the house. It's a tough decision to be made, right?
Oh, 100%.
But it needs to be done with proper guidance because, like, much to your point, sometimes one spouse doesn't have the ability to afford it, and stay in that property. So.
Exactly, but they want it,
of course,
and they sometimes get lost. Don't see the forest for the trees when going through the process because it's very emotional. It's like one of the hardest times that people go through in their lives, and so it's important to try to have good guidance, good professionals to help you, and I think that's very important when making that decision.
You just touched on a really important factor. I think it's the number 2 rated stressful event in someone's life. So because you're dealing with high emotions, high stress, like how do you manage your clients in that factor? Because I would imagine that would be very difficult because it's a very stressful topic, right? Very stressful time for their lives, and how do you guide them properly so that you put them at ease? Are there any special steps for that?
So that's a very good question. It is one of the most difficult times that people go through, and I think that's why I like doing what I do, is because I feel like I really can help people during this time, help them move on, start over again, get them their children, get them the assets that they want. And I try with all of my clients to impress upon them that it's a business decision and try to take the emotion out of it. And it's hard because it's a very emotional process. You were married to this person for a long time usually, and so it's hard to separate that. But I try to guide them and say, look, we have to just focus on what's going to benefit you. Let's focus on the future. Let's focus on getting through this so you can put this behind you, and look and trying to help them see how to move forward and see the future and see what their benefits will be afterwards, instead of focusing on the negative.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, Courtney, what are the first steps someone should take when considering going through a divorce?
So when you're considering going through a divorce, I think it's important to get all of your financial paperwork together, get a copy of the tax returns, get a copy of your bank statements, all of your financial institutions where you have investments. Know where that stuff is, because throughout the divorce process, you have to fill out financial disclosure documents that ask a list of all of your assets, the value, because throughout the divorce process, that's what we're doing. We're dividing up all of your assets. And so I think it's important to gather as much information as you can when you come into that first meeting with the divorce attorney to get advice, so they can really tell you and give you good, meaningful advice and not just talk in generalities. I think it's very important to try to understand what the whole estate is that needs to be divided throughout the process. And sometimes I get clients where they are what we refer to as the outspouse. They don't have a lot of access to the financial information. And so they sometimes are worried, like, I'm not going to know what we have. How do we find that out? And throughout the divorce process, there's a discovery time where we can issue subpoenas to financial institutions and also ask for documents from the other side in order to get that information.
Okay. So do you ever find it where a spouse is hiding assets? Does that happen every once in a while? And if that does happen, what's the approach on that?
Yes, so it does happen, and we see that often where one of the spouse who's in control of the assets sometimes doesn't disclose all of their assets. And so we typically would hire a forensic accountant who looks through the bank statements, and then they can see wire transfers or checks written and deposited in other accounts that leads us to find more information and find an undisclosed asset.
Okay, interesting. Okay. How do you ensure that all clients understand their rights and options throughout the divorce process?
I think that when hiring an attorney, it's important that you feel comfortable with that attorney. And I think communication is very important with your attorney. The client feeling comfortable to talk to the attorney and ask them questions. And also, it's important for the client to listen to the attorney and follow their instructions when going through the process. So I think open communication is very important.
Right. Okay. Are there any recent developments or trends in divorce law that viewers should be aware
of? In California, and what I've seen more frequently in Orange County with custody issues is the family code, which is the code that governs divorce. Part of it is the courts want frequent and continuing contact with both parents so long as it's in the best interest of the child. And so oftentimes, sometimes the mother, sometimes the father have been the primary parent during the marriage, and they would like to try to prevent that party from seeing the kid as much. Like they don't want to share custody equally, but unless there is some reason such as drugs, alcohol, or some other reason that that parent is not fit to take care of the parent equally, then a lot of the courts look to frequent and continuing contact and want as close to possible as an equal timeshare for the child.
Interesting. So it hasn't always been that way.
It seems to be changing more towards that way now.
So how does that work then? So essentially the child is living almost with both parents, right? So maybe like a week with one parent, a week with another, or rotating weekends, things like that. Is that typically how they try to set it up to make it as fair as possible?
So the courts want frequent and continuing contact, and they will look at the work schedules of the parents, because sometimes one parent, like if they're a firefighter or a police officer, their schedule changes a lot. And so the custody schedule really depends on the age of the child, the parent's occupation, when they work. Do they work 9-to-5 jobs? Do they have odd hour jobs? So there really is no like typical custody schedule. It's all like case dependent, and the facts and what the parties do and what works best for that family, I think is what the courts try to do.
About the age demographic. So
it's getting older.
Everybody keeps saying that.
It is.
Yeah. So
I've seen. I can talk
I
about
would
that
always
for a little
think that like the age demographic of people going through a divorce would be like in their 30s, and I only say that because I feel like people tend to get married towards the latter part of their 20s, early 30s, maybe.
Right.
I don't know if that's still a thing. It seems like maybe people are going to college and waiting for marriage a little bit longer, getting their career started first.
Yes,
so.
I've been seeing a lot of people wait longer to get married, wait longer to have children,
right,
and therefore wait longer to get divorced. I've had a lot of divorces where the parties are in their mid-60s. I've had divorces where my client started the divorce process at 84 years old.
No way.
Yes.
Wow.
And the divorce took 4 years, almost 5 years to complete.
Gosh.
So he was 89 when the divorce finished. So we have had that, but I've been seeing a big trend of people getting divorced a lot later.
Wow. I wonder why.
I know. I think because people are getting married later now.
Are these longer durations of marriages, or maybe at the second or third marriage? Because they're saying the divorce rate actually goes up after a second or a third marriage. Isn't that crazy?
Yes, you would think they would learn after the first.
I know. That's why I think that's kind of ironic. You're like, oh, I learned the first time. Right. I don't want to keep doing this.
Exactly, but I guess people don't. So, yeah, I don't. I've seen it both ways, where people have been married for 30 years and then got divorced, or they got married later and then get divorced a few years later. So I haven't seen a trend that way. I'll have to pay attention and get back to you on that.
Have you ever had a client get divorced and then get remarried that you're aware of?
Oh yes, I have done a client's prenuptial agreement, then I did the divorce, then I did a prenuptial agreement again, and his divorce, and then a prenuptial agreement.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Yes, I have seen that.
So they're not always just one-time clients.
No, they're not.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Katie.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.